So moving on, it's my turn, and Dr. Nelson's presentation set up minds really well because he spoke a bit about marine planning. But what is marine planning? My presentation will give an introduction to marine spatial planning, about why it is needed, the benefits, and a bit about the planning process by using an example. So why do marine spatial planning? Our seas are very busy. There are many established uses such as oil and gas and fisheries, and the potential for new uses such as offshore renewables and marine aquaculture. This means that there is competition for space and inevitable conflicts among some uses and users. The demand for marine goods and services such as food, energy, and habitat usually exceed the capacity of marine areas to meet all demands simultaneously. In many cases, users have free access to marine resources, including space. This often leads to overuse and eventual destruction of resources. These problems, coupled with other challenges such as a change in climate and cross-border issues, makes managing the marine space very difficult. And this is something that we could relate to in Trinidad and Tobago. Some public process must be used to decide what mix of outputs from the marine area should be produced over time and space. And that process is marine spatial planning. So what is marine spatial planning, or MSP as we call it? No single definition exists for MSP. It takes different forms depending on the context, but still the most commonly used one, probably the most widely used, and it's the one that we like to use here at IOC, is the one from the IOC UNESCO Guide on Marine Spatial Planning. In essence, marine spatial planning is a practical way to create and establish a more rational organization of the use of the marine space and the interactions between users, balance demands for development with the need to protect the environment, achieve social and economic objectives in an open and planned way, and ease pressures on ocean resources. Marine spatial planning is about building consensus, building sectoral consensus, and it provides a framework for good governance and is based on recognition of the interests of all stakeholders and inclusion of these interests where possible. Within a participatory planning process, there is room for stakeholder consensus building and balancing of interests among sectors, as well as among maritime uses and environmental protection. Marine spatial planning, rather than being a linear process, includes a number of key steps that are linked through many feedback loops. Once again, the step-by-step approach by the IOC UNESCO is probably the most widely used planning process in marine spatial planning around the world. And the steps include identifying need and establishing authority, organization of the planning process and stakeholder participation, very importantly, obtaining financial support, defining and analyzing existing and future conditions, preparing and approving the spatial plan, implementing and enforcing the plan, monitoring and evaluating performance, and revision of the plan. The process is adaptive with revisions done periodically, informed by new knowledge and data. So in order to illustrate the marine spatial planning process, I will use the example of the Seychelles, which is probably one of the best known examples of marine spatial planning for islands. The Seychelles comprises more than 100 islands with a vast exclusive economic zone under its jurisdiction. This large ocean state, as it is known, owing to the size of its ocean space, wanted to increase its marine protected areas to 30% of its EEZ, manage ocean uses, address climate change issues, and support its blue economy. And so in 2014, a marine spatial planning process was launched. In marine spatial planning, one of the first things that we do is establish authority for planning and obtain financing. In the Seychelles planning process, the MSP is led by the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate Change. There's an MSP executive committee which takes high-level decisions for decision making. The actual planning, however, is managed by an NGO, the Nature Conservancy, which works together with technical working groups and committees for planning. The working groups are thematic and transdisciplinary, comprising state representatives, the private sector, academia, and NGOs. There's also a MSP steering committee, which provides technical and sectoral advice, reviews technical output from the working groups, and makes recommendations to the high-level executive committee. The planning itself was funded by grants to both the NGO and the government, and implementation will be funded in part by the Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. Early on in the planning process, a set of guiding principles were developed through stakeholder consultation to be reflected in the planning and outputs. These include integration of laws, policies, and plans for relevant marine planning, coordination among all marine stakeholders, evidence-based planning. Howard spoke about this, meaning planning with the best available science and knowledge, transparency, inclusivity, and participation through widespread engagement, consultation, and communication with stakeholders and civil society, environmental stewardship, the application of the ecosystem-based approach, which includes considering interactions within ecosystems that includes humans, and the precautionary approach. Planning was organized into 5 themes, which include sectors or potential sectors that they regarded as priority for development and management. The timeline for development of the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan is 2014 to 2020. Work was divided into 2 phases, 1 and 2, with phase 2 divided into 2 parts. In phase 1, important outputs included a spatial data catalog, marine atlas, a zoning framework, and draft governance arrangements. In phase 2, there was a socioeconomic impact assessment, zoning design, governance for implementation, and financing options. Final plans and reports were due this year, but COVID has upended the planning process. The technical map shown on the right is one of the most recent outputs, but planning is incomplete. The stakeholder consultations for the multi-use zones have not happened. So we have that to look forward to and the completion of the plans. If you would like to follow progress, you can follow them on their website. They periodically post updates of what is happening. In the Seychelles, maritime spatial planning is being used to develop the blue economy. So alongside planning, the blue economy roadmap was developed, which outlines how the country will sustainably develop its oceans in the next decade. The roadmap recognizes that marine spatial planning is essential for effective coordination across blue economy sectors. That planning will help achieve goals for marine areas under protection and address climate change issues. It also recognizes that in an island context, land-sea connections are important, and that marine plans and land use plans should be synchronized. I just want to wrap up by talking a little bit about the benefits that marine spatial planning has. The benefits are many. This graphic is taken from actually the OECS Caribbean Regional Oceanscape Project brochure. Susanna will talk about the project a little later on, but it's a very informative infographic. And marine spatial planning can help reduce conflicts between sectors and create synergies between different activities. Importantly, for the blue economy, it can encourage investments by instilling predictability, transparency, and clearer rules for investors. It can increase coordination between administrative bodies through the use of a single instrument to balance the development of maritime activities. It can increase cross-border cooperation between countries and sectors, protect the environment through early identification of impact, and very importantly, it provides an opportunity for community participation in the management of the sea. Thank you.